y'all. So you submitted questions last week to me via Instagram and I'm here to answer them. Please note, this is just advice. So you're all lunatics for thinking that like I know the answers to everything, but here we go. My first question was, what are good starter plant recommendations? So I would refer you to my first video if you get the chance to watch it. I know it's long, but it covers 3 types of plants. The snake plant, the ZZ plant, and the pothos. Those are hands down the easiest plants. Okay, the second question was best plants to have if you always forget to water them. And shame on you. No, I'm kidding. Actually, the best plants to have if you forget a lot or you go out of town, snake plant's really great because remember, it can go in a dark corner and it can sacrifice having water for long periods of time. The ZZ plant's another one that I covered in my previous video. The link's in the description below if you want to go back and look at it. So that's a snake plant and a ZZ plant. Easy plants. If you forget to water them, they probably won't die. And then I'd also say probably a cactus. I've had this guy for a while here and I have not watered him for probably 2 weeks now and he's thriving and loving it. So next question I got was, what type of pots do you recommend? For instance, tray or no tray, hole or no hole? Excellent question. So for pots, I always recommend buying terracotta planters, which I know they seem boring, but they're always some of my best planters that I have. My plants that go in them thrive. And that's because they almost all have drainage holes at the bottom, which was my second piece I was going to touch on. 3 little drainage holes here. They actually need to drain out water and be almost dry between waterings. Otherwise, their roots tend to rot. And the last part of this question was tray or no tray. I always err on this side of getting a tray. So usually your terracotta planters at your local hardware store comes with a corresponding tray. You may as well get it. So I always like these because they're a good water catchment tool. So if your planter is on the floor, then you definitely want something to catch the water. And I learned this a little bit too late, but I would also recommend getting a cork mat to place underneath the planter itself. And this would go on your floor and it's basically to absorb all the moisture so that it's not creating water spots or damaging any part of your floor. Also, if you don't like terracotta planters or you just want something fun, I brought this out to give you an example of something cute and fun. So I actually had this aloe plant planted already in just a basic pot that has a drainage hole. And I had this cute painted planter from, I think, Anthropology. So Anthro, if you want to sponsor me, hit me up. All jokes aside, it was a cute planter. I just decided that I wanted to keep my aloe in something that it was comfortable being in and it was dwelling in, and I wanted to put it in something cute. So just an example of how you can plant a room. Okay, next question I got was, how do you know when to water the plants, or when do I water my plants? Basically, this is a very common theme and it's a good one, but unfortunately I don't have a good rule of thumb that goes across the board. But what I can tell you is what's worked for me. So for starters, I would suggest setting a schedule as a good plan for this. So for instance, mine is Sundays. I always water my plants on Sundays. Sunday! It's usually when I'm home. So while you're making the rounds and watering your plant, check the soil. So another good piece of information is always keep in mind the environment from which your plant came. So by this I mean a bird of paradise is a very tropical plant, right? So in rainforest, it's high humidity, gets lots of rain, has some sun. So that's how you treat that plant. On the opposite side of the spectrum is a cactus. And since they're desert dwellers, they actually require full sunlight to grow. and they require little water day over day. Instead, they like one drenching rain at one point in time. So they're just very different ways you have to approach your plants. Okay, next question I got was, when do I water my succulents? And this one's so hard. I've actually killed a few succulents in my life and I feel terrible about it. I'm learning to be better now. And what I typically do with mine, and it might work for you, is I have my succulents in these small pots. And as you can see in this one, the soil is really dry. And so because the soil is really dry, and I haven't watered this in 2 weeks, today I'll probably drench it in water and then it will be good for 2 weeks. But as you can see, it seems to be doing relatively well. I have it in full sunlight, I will say that as well. So succulents, a lot of sun, and maybe every 1 to 2 weeks, depending on how you water. If you drench it, I would say every 2 weeks. Okay, the next question was, how do I know what my leaves are telling me? So this one's also another good question because I'm gonna use the pothos as an example, as the baseline. On this pothos that I showed in my first video, as you can see on this side, I've actually planted 2 different pothos in here, types. And on this side, you can see some brown leaves. So this means that it got too much sun. It actually got like sunburned. I had it in full direct sun. I had it outside, I think, in a spot on my balcony that just gets way too much sun for plants that don't like a lot of sun, which the pothos is. So this tells me it was getting sunburned and I needed to give it a little less light, more indirect light. And then for yellowing leaves, usually that means that the plant is getting too much water. That means you're overwatering. And overwatering, as we discussed before, means that the soil is too damp and it's causing the roots of the plant to rot. So you just have to make sure that you're not overwatering. And the way you can check that is checking the soil each day of the week that you've set up to start watering your plants. And if it's too damp, then skip the watering for that week. That's a good rule of thumb. So for this last and final question, y'all know I had to be extra and bring a huge plant into the frame. The question was actually, what do I do if my plant is leaning? So it was a relatively large plant and it was leaning over, and I've encountered this issue myself, as evidenced here. And so what I did was I actually got a stake from my local hardware shop, and it matches the color green of the stem, so you can't really tell. And then I got some twine or yarn, whatever you want to use. Twine is just more durable. And so I tied it up I staked it into the ground and tied up the stems to it so that it started growing straight up instead of to the sides. And as you can tell, since that time, there are some newer stems that are starting to grow out again. So I need to retie this yarn and make sure all of them are encompassed into this one loop so that they're all growing up straight. So all of that to say, if your plants are leaning, that means you're doing something right because they're growing big time, and that's a yay. And we can easily remedy the situation with a stake and some yarn. And with that, I think I answered all of the questions I received via Instagram, and I just want to say I really appreciate that you all submitted those questions to me. It means you trust me with your plant care, and for that, I'm greatly appreciative of you. As we all know, I love plants, so hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, let me know what you want to see more of, what you'd like to see in the future, and with that, happy planting!